So we were just getting on to your inspiration to go to Rojava. What was going on in your mind then?
Yeah, well, like I say, I've been out of things for quite a while, really. It was a quiet time all over for me. And like I say, still in touch with some friends, and you couldn't really miss the Kobani situation. It was everywhere. I mean, it was it was very widely covered in its early days, wasn't it? We'd all seen it in different kinds of media, the mainstream media, and of course the more activist media, which had a more analytical take on, the kind of society that the primarily the Kurds and others were trying to establish in that vacuum of the Syrian civil war, taking their opportunity to build this more egalitarian, grassroots utopia. It was considered by some, and so I was quite enthused and interested in that, but I didn't really, in the early days, think that I'd end up there because I wasn't initially aware that they were happy to take Western volunteers. And again, it had been a while since I'd really done anything. I thought I'd sort of done my last thing in that regard, with things like Palestine and then so on. And yeah, I think I'd actually gone to work in Saudi Arabia at the time as a teacher, which I think at the time for me that was a bit of a marker of just how much I'd left idealism and idealistic principles behind. I was working for British Aerospace as a teacher on a military base, and I've obviously had misgivings about the ethics of that, but prepared to do it because I accepted the contract. It was good money. I'd been in a bit of a hole in various ways, not only financially actually, and so there I was in Dammam in Saudi Arabia, teaching English to military cadets, continuing loosely to follow the Rojava story, in the news. And the story broke of a couple of volunteers had been out there, and it was when I first realised that this was something possible. And as with all these other things, like the Zapatista caravan in Genoa and Palestine, I immediately felt that enthusiasm again. So, right, that's something, I might be able to do. So I, very helpfully, the Daily Mail mentioned the Lions of Rojava Facebook page, which I got onto.
So it's all thanks to the Daily Mail?
All thanks to the Daily Mail, yeah. And I DM'd them. Got a very quick reply. I said, look, this is what I've been doing before. I mentioned a couple of things I'd done. Person I ended up dealing with was really friendly and enthusiastic, and seemed to think that I was, a CV like mine was the sort of person they were looking for, because obviously they were at the same time they were very welcoming of they wanted solidarity and friends essentially, from the West. Obviously skeptical as well, and rightfully, as I'm sure all kinds of people tend to wash up in a scene like that.
Absolutely.
But they were very welcoming to me, very keen. And within a few weeks, I was there. We got a week's paid leave on the Saudi contract, and part of the contract was a free flight to wherever you wanted to go, return flight for your leave period. So most of the teachers went back home. I went to Suleimania in northern Iraq to meet the agent contact to then smuggle me over the border into Syria. Met young Jack Holmes on my first day there. We were the same intake. In Suleimania, in the safe house of Suleimania. Suresh, Jack, got there, I think, a day or two before me. And he, I, and a couple of others made the journey, met up with a bigger group in the hills on the Syrian-Iraqi border. Crossed the river. And into the training base, into Karachi, the headquarters of that westernmost the easternmost canton, Jizre, and from there into a unit into battle.
And on the moments of your progression of that journey, was there any doubt at any point?
No.
Okay.
The only doubt came was when it gradually became apparent that they were quite reluctant to put Westerners into battle. Actually, they wanted us there, but they didn't want us in danger. They wanted the PR that it brought, and I think again they just wanted that sort of sense of solidarity and friendship, and people around the world care, so they were happy to have us there, because as I'm sure you've heard the expression, "Kurds have no friends but the mountains." So they were happy to have us there and happy that the world was taking an interest, but they didn't want us in battle. I think for very good reasons. Also, I think they were quite pragmatic about the the political and the PR sort of fallout that might bring if Westerners started dying, which of course they soon did. So I had to really push to get into battle, as lots of us did. And I quickly got myself sent to Shengal, just over the border, back in Iraq again, and engaged in some static standoff city fighting. We had the mountains and the high ground. Daesh had the whole city. And we had daily and nightly crossfire with occasional small incursions from the Daesh. They try to sneak up and get into our ground.
What year would that have been for Shengal?
Early 2015, January 2015.
And
February 2015, actually. I went there in late January. By the time, spent a few weeks just in Rojava itself, not doing much, doing sentry duty in villages. Pushed to get myself sent to Shengal. So that would be February 2015 by the time I was there.
And how did you find it then? Because obviously at that point Daesh are still very much on a high, like they're not
still very much their heyday, absolutely.
So how was it? How was the combat then? With it, obviously.
Well, it was actually a lull in combat generally. I mean, in Rojava, nobody was really fighting at that time. There might have been a few spats and incidents, but really, it was the long build-up to the big anticipated push to take Tel Hamas, which really kicked off that whole push from east to west through the territory, really.
So you say like sporadic, and was it more like sort of trench warfare, like the distant fighting?
Well, in Shengal, you mean?
Yeah, were they using much of the like heavy explosive sort of stuff that they moved towards at that point?
I'm sure the city was wired up and rigged to the nines, but we never went into the city. It was a standoff, really, as I say, with occasional small, assaults from Daesh, but mostly it was just crossfire and mortars coming in. A lot of shooting back and forth with Dushka guns and heavy machine guns and small arms too.
Almost like, just to compare it to people that might not have that much experience or understanding, sort of like a trench warfare kind of situation, like it's very static, not much.
Yeah, we weren't using trenches though. I mean, we were in bunkers and buildings, and the high ground that we had was almost like small village buildings, if you can.
So you were directly overlooking the city.
Directly overlooking the city from stone buildings, some mud buildings, low rise buildings.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. And
some quite built, some kind of a bit more ramshackle. Had a bit of a charm about it, Shengal. I mean, all the buildings are sort of conjoined and crowded and on top of each other. And some were quite elegant. They built little pillars, and there were some little arches and vaulted roofs. It was a little bit ornate, but very almost like a village, really. Except it was all on this rising bit of ground, and our way of moving was through tunnels and holes bashed in walls and little rat runs through these abandoned buildings. It was only us and the Peshmerga there at the time. No locals.
Mm. Where were the
directly overlooking, as you say, the city full of ISIS.
Where would the locals have been at that time?
I just fled.
Or even like local units, were the Yazidis, were they part of the?
I didn't see any. Just us and us Kurdish forces, and well, the Pesh, of course, are Kurdish as well. No, I didn't see local inhabitants or local. The SDF as such didn't really exist then. That started to come into being during my later months.
So just, I mean, Shengal is very well known, like throughout the world, for the almost genocide of the Yazidi people.
Of the Yazidi people, yeah.
Slavery. Did you see? So culturally, they were gone.
But they didn't have their own militia that I saw. They didn't have their own forces as such.
So would they have been somewhat?
We had Yazidi people in the epic, right, but not. Right. They didn't. We didn't have their own independent battalions. Is that what you're asking? Is that what you're asking? Yeah. Were there local forces? Yeah. Didn't see any. Didn't see any.
So it was just you.
Not in Shengal. Not at that time.
The way you're describing it, like tunnels and holes in walls and that, were you very much like did Daesh have the upper hand in terms of firepower still at that time, with like the heavy weapons and that kind of thing, mortars?
They had mortars, they had dushkas. I don't think they had much heavier than that because the Americans would have just bombed it. Right. I think at that time, so anything big they tried to move around. We had air support, yeah. Right. Yeah. Anything big Daesh tried to move around, the Americans wiped out. I mean, they weren't always reliable, you know. I mean, they were fighting hard. But no, but we didn't have anything that big either. I think the Duska was the biggest thing we had in Shengal as well. So, there were more Daesh than there were of us at that time. We had the advantage of high ground, and that was it, I think.
How did that situation?
But neither side seemed to really be committed to trying to take the other either.
Okay. And how did that situation resolve then?
Slowly. The place was encircled and slowly taken. I think it took the best part of 2015 of that year. And they said, we're doing this slowly. We're not rushing this. We're going to do it slowly. And they did. They took it eventually. I was on another operation when they did that. I was back in Rojava in Jizre Canton, fighting somewhere else.
And how did that come about? Your transition from Shengal?
The Tel Hamis operation. As I say, the much anticipated big push that everybody had been waiting for. Everybody was languishing in Rojava. I mean, I got myself to Shengal because I wanted to fight. Everybody else was just waiting. And then it came, and we were all pulled out of Shengal, and we all went on the road together in a massive convoy, massive big jubilant celebration. Thousands of people riding on trucks and Hiluxes and armored vehicles and every kind of armored vehicle you can think of, all bashed up and old and his last legs. But all these teenagers, flags everywhere, cheering, music, fires, and it was a bit like a traveling sort of festival or a traveling. I don't know how to describe it really, like a caravan, a festival sort of caravan, procession. Of all these people off to do something, fucking magnificent. Just really stick it to Daesh finally. We're ready, we're going. And it was a very jubilant time. I think it was the next day that Bagok, the Australian, was killed in a battle that I was only sort of. I was sort of about a click back, waiting to go in. They were forward. Bagok Costa, who died, British lad, who died a couple of weeks after that. And stuff soon got real. We've been fighting out and spatting in Shengal, and some of us have been injured. I carried a bloke into a bunker one night because he'd been shot on the berm, and we'd had we'd been in it. But then the Tel Hamis push, I mean, the way they fight. They just go for it. They started to adopt more tactics throughout that push. Actually, started to get a bit more sensible, encircle, give Daesh a route out, let them move south. Let them head for Raqqa or in that general direction. But in the early days, it was just a case of we're going to go fight them. Smash them and as sophisticated as that, really.
And we got Thunder. And
I think by the time you went there, they'd evolved tactics a bit more, because really their background was the guerrilla, and Rojava fighting wasn't guerrilla fighting, much as the activists and the lefties like to say it was. It wasn't. They were using conventional ground tactics and learning how to fight a conventional ground war. Guerrillas don't use tanks, Humvees, Panzers, big guns. It wasn't guerrilla warfare at all. I don't care what anybody says. It was a conventional ground war, and they had to learn how to do it. And they learned the hard way, and the cost was high.
Did you see a lot of tanks and heavy artillery sort of thing within the?
Not a lot, no, but we did have them. They were there. Yeah.
That's interesting.
But I mean, with a tank, crew competence, with a Panzer, crew competence is a big factor. Not just a bunch of really keen young'uns to get in and race towards the fire, and gun the bastards up a bit. It takes a bit more than that to use a tank properly, and any other piece of equipment as well, right down to a rifle.
Yeah. So
it was a learning curve for them.
And were you? I don't know. Were you a part of that learning curve? How was it for you? Because obviously you'd had military.
I had an army background, but that only really takes you so far when everybody else around you doesn't have an army background, because a soldier is part of a machine made of other soldiers, and if everybody else around you is doing it different.
But were you aware of I don't want to say things, mistakes? Was it a frustration for you?
Yeah, of course it was. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're a very gung-ho attitude, and very reluctant to really. It sounds arrogant to say they were reluctant to take advice, but there's with machines, there's a way to use them and a way not to use them. And saying things like, "Well, we fight with our spirit. It's different out here." Well, fine, but it's like trying to use a chisel by holding it the wrong way up. Sometimes it's just the right way and the wrong way, and that can be very frustrating trying to tell that to very very cocksure, blasé, young fighters that will just laugh in your face when you try and tell them that anything but their way is more practical or more Yes, it could be very frustrating in all kinds of ways. The mistakes they make on things like sentry duty, the mistakes they make tactically. Yeah, yes, it was huge frustration because it was so dangerous, and brought danger and injuries and
But you did
mistakes.
You saw them grow within your time there. You saw them learn and adapt and professionalize.
Yes, yeah, to an extent, but the still the chaos and the danger and the laxity and the complacency, they didn't disappear. It was. I don't think it ever will. I think when you've got a martyr culture that really celebrates the martyr, you don't have that sense of self-preservation. The thing about Western armies is that self-preservation. They don't shy from danger, but they also maximise first aid and tactical efficiency and survival in a way that the YPG and the Kurdish-led forces don't. And I think that's tied in with that martyr culture.
I do hear a lot about the martyr culture, and obviously it is a big...
I don't diss it, but it's a very different approach.
No, it is. It's definitely a big part of the culture, but I think from the perspective that for people like that, like the oppression that the Kurds were under, the guerrilla movement came out of, and for many other people in a similar situation that have gone through similar struggles, life is cheaper for these people because their lives are valued less. Like they can.
I think the individual is cheaper. Yeah. Again, curiously,
I'm not saying from the perspective of like a commander or anything. I'm saying when you grow up in a certain way, then death is your friend. Death is a lot closer to you. You're not.
Possibly. I think when you celebrate the martyr, I think there are several things to say on that. I think firstly, it's a collective reaction in the face of genocide to make less of the individual life and more of the collective. firstly. And that's what I was trying to say a second ago, that paradoxically, that's something that they do have in common with the Western soldier. The individual is only valuable in terms of his connection to the wider collective. But that plays out in very different ways. I also think there's cultural pride involved, again, which I think underpins that reluctance to learn or take advice from Westerners, these big, foreigners who've parachuted in with their capitalist ideas and so forth. They'll dance their own way or not at all, but they'll do it their own fucking way, and that can be very frustrating because you're coming there with a Western mindset and the mindset of a professional soldier who knows how to do basic things and trying to sort of say, well, if you just did it like this, it's going to work better. And the reason that teenager laughs in your face is because it's a cultural reaction of defense and pride and survival. It's something very, very deeply embedded in their sense of identity and sense of who they are. It's not just that they are, reluctant to learn or somehow backward. It's more that their pride and determination to do it their own way is a core part of their reaction to genocide. Or
so it's genocide, how you keep your identity alive.
Yes, identity. Yeah.
But I can understand.
But that can be fucking frustrating when you're on no bet or on the berm, and then they're just behaving ridiculously, or about to go into battle, and they're all over the fucking place. That really tell yourself then. These high-minded things that we're saying to each other now. As I'm sure you've probably seen yourself.
Okay. I think of a few times, but
I bet, yeah.
So the people you were around, did they shape up in time for this?
Well, some did and some didn't. I mean, some were really together and good and efficient and impressive in the first place. Others, some you saw maturing. Absolutely.
So how was the push?
Don't forget their kids. Most of them they're young. And I remember there was one lad I was with before we went to battle. Actually, he was just this young kid who, when I arrived in Jizere, they were having a bit of a bonfire and a dance, which they all love to do, of course. And he grabbed me and he was dragging me into the dance, and he was just this kid, really, quite excited to meet a Westerner. And I saw him towards the end of my year out in Rojava, and he looked like he'd aged years. He had stubble. He was driving a Humvee. He was more serious. He was still a bit of he was friendly and a bit of a joker, but much more. He'd been through stuff. You could tell.
They age quickly.
He had responsibility on his shoulder. They age quickly. They sure do. Yeah, they really do.
So, did you see it? Did you see it through the push to tell Hamas?
Yeah. As I say, that very first battle, Costa and Bagok and Judy Vietnam and a few of the others were in that panzer with the Kurds that really went in hard, and fought. And as I say, I don't think there was a big plan there.
So they just sent a tank straight
charged on in panzer, not tank, panzer. Tank has the great big swiveling gun on top. Panzer is just a troop carrier.
Right.
Okay, but it's got a machine gun mounted on the roof, and you can get up out of the hatch and fire.
Is that because I remember the Kurds called armored vehicles Panzer, but is that an actual? Are they called Panzers? Are they from a?
Yeah, but they don't call a tank a Panzer, as far as I'm aware.
But so what?
I've forgotten what they do call a tank actually, but no, they definitely distinguish between a Panzer and a tank. A tank has got a great big fat swiveling gun on top that fires a shell, which will blow things up.
So it'd be
most of Panzer's
an armored personnel carrier.
Yeah, armoured personnel carriers, Panzer, yeah.
Okay.
And so that's what they use on that very first push. Bagok, Australian, Ashley Johnson. Costa, Kamal, Eric Costa Schofield. Judy Vietnam. And I think that was it for the Westerners, really. Because they'd been in Shengal longer than me and they knew the commander better, so they got in. I was bloody jealous. I was with Jordan Matson, American guy, and we were sort of back a bit, watching this happen. They went in at night. All this red tracer flying around and screaming on the radio.
Are we into the city at this point, or is this?
No, this is a village. They went to take a village. That was the very first assault.
Wow.
So we were back a bit, just in the hulu, in this half broken down little bit of a mud hut, actually, just looking over this low wall. We were supposed to go in. Commander Suran said, "Okay, I'm going to come back for you two, and then we're going in next." He never came back. He must have found something else to do, and we didn't get in that night. So I was bloody disappointed and fuming. Met Costa the next day, and I said, "You know about Bagok?" No, what? I didn't say another one of us is injured. And, Bagok was dead. And then it was I think for our unit, it was a bit of a quiet time again. Other units, because they sort of leapfrogged and, gave different units a chance. You can do the next battle, you can do the one after that, and so on. And so I think it was a couple of months before it came round, and I actually got in a place called Tel Nasser. We pushed quite a way forward by that time.
Just to go through, were you close to Bagot?
No, I wasn't close to any of them. He was a mate to have a laugh with, over the month that I'd spent in Shengal, and we were around each other all the time. But I didn't really form close friendships with any of that group. No, we were sort of matey. I had a bit of friction with Costa, but we,
So
when we went out on the Tel Hamis push, we were all sort of quite tight again, because we were among the bigger group now of all the others who'd been in Rojava. We were the guys who'd been in Shengal, and they're the ones who'd really fought there. So we formed quite a tight group again. But yeah, Costa and Bagot died very quickly after that. So what were you going to say?
Would that have been your first time losing a comrade, someone you were fighting with?
In battle, yeah, absolutely, yeah. The only thing I compare it to, well, I mean, I wasn't there when Bagot died, so it's different anyway. But obviously, College of the Army, I basically died while I was trying to look after him. Yeah, I suppose so. But again, I wasn't there when Bagok was killed. I was only told about it the next morning.
It will still hit you, friend, even if you wouldn't say friend, but you're friendly. You're in the same fight together, and then
I'd like to think we were friends.
Yeah, so even more, you're friends, and you're in the same fight together, and you just found out he's gone. Did you have time to process that, or was it just
No, you don't. I don't know what your experience was, but you tend to lose so many friends one after another, and they just pile up.
And Bagok was the
again. I think this goes back to this thing that you say. Their perspective must be that life's cheap. I mean, I don't entirely buy that, but I do think I know what you mean. That you don't sheer time to process really fully and emotionally the loss of one individual when there's another and another and another and another. And so that must really affect the Kurds' perspective, I think, because they grow up with that. That's what it's like for them. That's what life's like for them. Yeah. But yeah, did I really get a chance to process Bagot? No, not really. And they have quite a what's the word? The word won't come to me now. But they have quite a no, I can't think of it. But their perspective on our shaheeds was, don't make a fuss about it. Don't make a big. We understand, we know, but they're quite sort of hard-boiled, I suppose, and quite a wry, quite a wry and hard-boiled way. If they saw, there's somebody once, sort of wiping a few tears out my eyes, and they're sort of ribbing me gently over it, and just not nastily, but just Judy crying, and they've got quite a wry, hard-boiled sort of approach to it, because how else do you deal with it? What else do you?
You just gotta make fun of it, really. So you said Costa, that's Eric Scarfield. He was killed soon after.
He was killed soon after. Yeah, I'd actually. I mean, we all sort of got a bit split up because he ended up, permanently, I think, with a bunch of Kurds. A load of other Westerners had influxed into Saran's Tabor, and I, in the meantime, because I was so pissed off at missing that battle, jumped into another Tabor because I thought I'd have a better chance of getting into the fight if I was in a different unit, which didn't actually work out. They actually saw a bit more action than me, in the end anyway. So I wasn't there when Costa died. I found out about it a few weeks later, but he actually died, I think, not much more, perhaps a bit less than 2 weeks after Bagok, after Ash Johnston. So we got a bit split up. I mean, again, the push to Tel Hamis had sort of brought us together, but then other things sort of, took us different ways.
That's the way it is. That's the way it always
It is the way it
now,
is. Yeah, people come and go, and as I say, I made a mistake. I should have stayed. In some ways, it was a mistake. If I'd stayed in Surrounds Tabor, I would have got into battle, more and sooner on that particular operation, the Tel Hamas operation. Having said that, it was an all-male Tabor, quite a maverick all-male. Saran didn't want women in his Tabor. And if I hadn't crossed over, I wouldn't have had that experience of being in that more sort of regular mixed Yepigay Tabor that's more known. I would have only really had that experience, I suppose, if I'd stayed with Saran, of that much more irregular all-male unit. Is that half an hour again?
Yeah.
Fucking hell. Hey, good job you charged both batteries then. I feel like we're just getting started on Rojava. I don't know how you're going to edit this down, by the way.